Today on Business Growth Talks, we have David Wolf, who's a media entrepreneur, music composer, and founder of Audiovita Studios, where he helps authors, business professionals, and thought leaders expand their brands through podcasting and audiobooks. With over 25 years worth of experience in audio production, he has created content for radio, TV, film, and multimedia. He spans across publishers like Inkit, Morgan James, and Paper Raven Books, as well as high-profile podcasts like Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert and Kim Kawasaki. He has also produced audio content for many global brands like Disney, Discovery Channel, etc. Beyond media, David has a background in corporate finance, real estate investment, and aviation, holding a commercial pilot's license with an instructor certifications. He is a strong advocate for transcendental meditation, which he credits with transforming his mindset and approach to business. Just a quick one. I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining me today and being with me on this show. One thing that is really, really important I want to share with you is this show is growing really well, and I'm so proud of it, and I'm so pleased that you're enjoying this content. But if you could please hit the follow and subscribe to this channel, it will really help the channel on its being able to grow and the people that we can have on this show. So please do consider, if you have a moment, please can you hit the subscribe button and the follow button, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much, David. How are you today?
Doing well, Mark. Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on my show. We're going to delve into your journey. We're going to delve into how you work with your clients and also how you've grown businesses as well. So really looking forward to speaking to you today. But as always, with the first question I ask all of my guests is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
So to me, the business mindset, it has to do with the path between the passion, the thing I like to do, the way I want to show up in the world to have an impact, and bringing that to market in a commercial way. And what is the mindset it takes to do that? It might introduce the concept of scale, where we think about growing. It might be I have a contained idea about how big I want this business to be, and I don't need to have it any bigger for whatever my reasons may be. But it has to do with the passion to commercialization path. That's, to me, the business mindset.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it on its head, because that whole idea of things that you love doing but actually can generate revenue is where you're going to get the most amount of leverage and the most enjoyment as well as financial reward. So I think that's probably one of the best answers I've had, because that is, in essence, some people have hobbies. If there's things that you're passionate about and it doesn't monetize, it's a hobby. And things that you might not necessarily enjoy but makes you a lot of money, both those things don't necessarily make people happy when it comes to business and commerce and building things. So I think, what were you passionate about when you were younger?
What a great question. And I actually was going to go there, and you just went there for me. At age 7 or 8, my parents got me a snare drum. Actually, before that, I was using Lincoln Logs. I don't know if your audience knows the toys, the Lincoln Logs, the sticks.
Right, yeah.
I was playing drums on a lamp and some furniture in my parents' house. I grew up north of Chicago in the States. And so I had this ability or this desire to express myself rhythmically. In fact, I remember my earliest influence about rhythm was the sound of the washing machine. And I started to relate to it as there was something about the pattern recognition to me. And eventually that grew into a music career, beginning with the drums. So this banging on the lamps, my parents weren't so crazy about how I ruined the furniture. So they got me a snare drum. And then from there, the whole drum set, and I began to play in bands, finally started taking lessons, and became a pretty good player. I was eventually a freelance drummer in the Chicago area, playing everything from weddings and bar mitzvahs. And I was playing with fusion groups and electric and acoustic and jazz. I played a lot of small group jazz as I was growing into it. So the passion was music, in a word.
Yeah. So I'm interested, like freelance musician. So were you in any sort of bands for like long term, or was the whole like you were just flexible that you could play different types of music, or were you in
Well, it was,
specific bands?
I think that I approached it as a freelance so that I would have this ability to be the chameleon of
Mm,
drummers. I could go do this, I could go do that. There were with that some steady engagements. One was with a fusion band that was largely influenced by the work of Chick Corea, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever Chick Corea, Mahavishnu Orchestra, other fusion bands, funk and rock. And so that was a band called Bagel of Fun. And the reason it was called Bagel of Fun is because when we would rehearse in my parents' basement every week, we would bring in bagels and have bagels and coffee and then rehearse all the tunes. And we were writing all original tunes, no covers, it was all original. And that was really my first foray into writing. Really
right.
that, and I did some. The other steady stuff I did was I was part of the house band at an amusement park that was it was part of the Marriott Company's franchise called Marriott's Great America. Um, and for your people that aren't American, sorry about the name. But anyway, that's what it was. And now they're a part of the Six Flags franchise, which I don't know if they're international, but they're here in the States. And so we had a gazebo and we would play 5 hour sets of Dixieland music, traditional jazz.
Yeah.
And that's really where I learned how to play jazz as a drummer
Right.
because the instrumentation was tuba was the bass player,
Mm.
then trombone, trumpet, clarinet, banjo, and tenor saxophone. And so, to help a tuba swing, you got to have some nuance to that thing.
Yeah.
It required some hands and just the way to make that work. And so that's really where I learned how to swing as a drummer.
And do you still
I
play
also
now?
had I'm not playing actively anyway, really. I have a set of electric drums that I'll occasionally work on, and I have a keyboard nearby. Eventually, this all moved into the vocabulary of music because at some point I decided rather than simply being a drummer, and there's a lot within the drummer spectrum. I decided that I wanted to break out of just the drums and learn the language of music, learn how to write. So I started writing charts for that Dixieland band and on from there, charts for the Bagel of Fun fusion group and other things. And eventually this led to a career in commercial music production for commercials, radio, TV, film, and the like.
And was that your first foray into the more commercial side, the more business side of it, doing jingles and
Yes.
ads and things like that?
Yes, and this speaks to the question you asked at the outset, which was the business mindset. I was very passionate about music, but I was also passionate about making money. And I knew that there was a lot of money to be made in that business. And
Mm.
I lived in Chicago, and that market was extremely vibrant historically. A lot of the famous commercials that came out of the States predominantly were came out of Chicago, New York, and some in Los Angeles. But Chicago and New York were really the foundation of what we used to call the jingle business, right? So it's songs about products, it's scoring and sound design for commercials and film. So I learned the craft of that, and I saw it as a way to make good money, still doing music, but in a way that was much more within the box of a commercial business model.
Yeah. And then you moved on to radio, didn't you? You had some time in public broadcasting, not public, but in traditional
Well,
broadcasting.
I so within the business model of writing music and producing audio for clients for advertising agencies, many of the commercials we produced were strictly for radio.
Right.
So it was either a radio commercial with a script and we would produce it, or it was a commercial where there was a film and we were scoring to the film, much like you'd do a feature film.
Yeah.
So, but a shorter version of 30 or a 60-second spot. There was a time when there were 60-second television commercials. This was a long time ago. My radio involvement happened years later when I was doing a show called Small Biz America, where much like the show we're on now with you as host, where I was talking to entrepreneurs across a wide spectrum of business models and genres, just talking to them about their business philosophy, their path, how they think about things. And so it was that was syndicated nationally across terrestrial radio.
Mm.
So that may be where you're picking that up
Yeah,
is
that was what I picked up.
I was a syndicated. We had a short format where I would introduce a problem, and then they would break to a commercial, and then there'd be a solution at the back. So it was an ABA form,
Right.
but a business form, business problem solution type of scenario.
So what I find doing this show as a host is that I get to have great conversations with people like you, and I'm always learning a marketing technique or a sales technique or how to improve operations From that show, what did you learn? What did you take from that helped you in your other businesses later on?
Wow, it was a lot of shows. We did about 300 episodes during a few years there. So there's a wide spectrum, but I interviewed people that had built very large real estate businesses, for example. And in that instance, he would talk about the book he wrote and the fact that um, he had really worked from a principled framework, values driven.
Mm, mm,
So that's one example, a very values driven. Here's how I want to make an impact on the world. This is how I treat my employees. Um, these are the mistakes I've made or the missteps I've made that I've corrected for, those sorts of things.
mm.
One of my other interesting guests was a guy named Michael Gerber, who wrote The E Myth,
Oh
and you
yeah,
might be
of course, one of
familiar
my
with The E
favorite
Myth.
books.
So I got to know Michael a little bit. And this was a classic book, right? So Michael, of course, shared everything there is to know of systems in it. I think of all the people I've interviewed, and not surprisingly, he was the most impactful because he really literally wrote the book on passion, this
Yeah,
business mindset question, back to the formation for
yeah,
the episode, this idea of you've got someone who loves to make pies, but it's a very different matter making the pies than making a business out of them.
yeah,
So from there, I still hold this true. It's the systems that run business.
yeah.
The business I run now today, Audiovita Studios, it could not have been enabled without the work of my now CEO, but then COO, Erica Yoakum, who took all of the sort of the intuitive things I was doing and systematized them.
Yeah.
So, in terms of scheduling, in terms of production flow, all the things that go into producing podcasts and audiobooks. So, I think the systematic approach, the idea that the people run the systems and the systems run the business, that was profoundly impactful for me in terms of some of the people I've interviewed. There are probably loads of others,
Yeah.
but I wasn't prepared for the question.
It's all
It's
right,
been
don't worry.
years since I've been doing that show. So, there it is,
I just
memory
wanted to
again.
explore your varied and diverse sort of experience with music and audio and stuff like that. And so
Sure.
leads me on to why did you start Audiovita Studios?
Vita was a reaction formation. You'll find this interesting. I'll take you back a bit. So, drummer, then I learned the business of writing to film and advertising music. And then I got married in 1985 and we moved from Chicago to Dallas, Texas. And that turned out to be a very vibrant market. There was a lot of room for a young, very ambitious 25-year-old to start a new commercial music company. There were a few there, but none of them were as hungry and as modern as I am like that. Let's see. So, remind me your original question.
So
I
the
wanted to
question
set
was
it
like, why did you start Audiovita Studios?
right, right. So this company before Audavita was called Cry Wolf Music, pun intended.
Yeah.
And the format of the business was nothing novel. It was a music company that wrote music for clients, largely ad agencies and other production companies. But it was all formed around the idea that I have to be writing the music. I was the creative generator.
Right.
Initially, I was the sales guy too. But
Mm.
eventually it went from 85, 90% sales to now I'm in the studio and I have this clientele and they all come in and it was running on itself. It was self feedback loop, a positive way. But it was all based on me having to do it. And so after about 13 years doing that and being in the studio project after project, I soon began to feel like it was time for me to move more into the business side of things rather than pure creative and begin to, because I had other people running the business, my wife and some others, and move into creating a business that I could scale. And it didn't rely strictly on me trading time
Mm.
or creative energy for money. It started with a path where my brother called me at some point. He was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we now are. And I was getting fatigue on being creative on demand. And with Cry Wolf, I had closed it down or I was in the process of winding it down. And he said, "Do you want to make bagels?" Again, the bagel motif. So what had happened was is a cousin of ours had grown a company to about 3 million US and created a retail and wholesale company called Wolf's Bagels, and it had gone bankrupt. And I had some money saved. I had made some money in the music business, and he asked me if I wanted to go into business with him and restart this bankrupt company. For me, it meant, oh, edible widgets, scale.
Yeah.
This works. So I took my family back to Albuquerque, New Mexico. We had lived in Santa Fe earlier and then came back to Dallas, but we moved us to Albuquerque. We redeployed the company mostly as wholesale. And we grew to about 1 million or so US. And so it was there that I learned about scale, about 30 employees, about a 24/7 workflow cycle.
Mm.
Because in the bakery business, it's a constant flow. I'll tell you, the secret is I was not born to be in the bakery business. Fortunately, he was a guy that was, and he is. So he took on the logistical and the
Mm.
practical and the tactical part of making the product. And I dealt with finance and marketing and raising money and whatever else
Yeah.
that we needed to do, sales.
Yeah.
And so it was a good split of division of labor for us. Ultimately, I sold the business to him after about 8 years, understanding this business wasn't for me, but I now understood the power of the business is running even if I'm not there writing a
Yeah.
piece of music, so to speak.
Mm.
So that was so from there, I started to move into back into my roots, production, audio, and ultimately video, and started networking with podcasts. I started my own podcast, A Small Biz America, which I explained earlier. And from that, I started to help others produce their own show. That grew. And then at the same time, I was networking with people in the publishing industry, seeing that there was a growth, very high growth happening in audiobooks,
Yeah.
audio versions, what we used to call books on tape.
Yeah.
So that was the level of participation. And at that point, I was doing it all myself. I
Mm.
was running the business, I was selling, and really opportunistically responding to people that wanted me to help them.
Right.
And then right around 2018 or so, it started to explode. And I brought in a VA who became my COO and now CEO of Audiovita, Erica, to help me start to offload some of the work.
Yeah.
And then another guy named Sean, who runs the whole podcast side of our business now, 30 or 40 shows in production. And eventually Mark Shipman, who runs the whole audiobook side, doing 200 books a year. And so that's the developmental path of me starting solo again, but then wanting to scale. And now today, I'm not operationally involved in the business on a production level. I'm
Yeah.
still doing some business development, but even that I'm starting to outsource and work on transitioning out of that. Some of this is a function of my age. I'm 65 and it's time to, but I'm still growing the business in other ways.
Mm.
So I don't know if I answered your
No,
question.
no,
I've answered
that's
it and then
perfect.
some, but
So,
this is the
who are
flow.
your
Yeah.
ideal client? What podcast or book publisher which one like, who do you think as your ideal client when you're looking to like target with
Yeah,
marketing and things?
no, it's a great question. One of the problems with both sides of our business, one of the challenges is the targeting. So you hit the nail right up, straight up there. By nature of myself and my interest in business, are we have attracted naturally the nonfiction author and the business podcaster.
Right.
So that's really the core of our business even today. The 30 or 40 shows we have that are in podcasting, by and large, are businesses that are using the podcast as a marketing endeavor.
Yeah.
They're using it to grow the business. The podcast itself, in and of itself, it's not the end game. It's
Mm.
the means to an end.
Yeah.
Similarly, on the audiobook side, we're serving authors. So about 70% of our audiobook production are nonfiction business authors, memoirs, serious
Yeah.
authors that are writing about subject matter that is not fictional,
Yeah.
as by nature of nonfiction. So that's the most of the market we serve. Having said that, I do have a partnership with a group with a filmmaker in Los Angeles, and we have been developing what I'll call entertainment podcast products. It's a higher risk corner of our portfolio, but it is a partnership I have, and we're developing true crime series, some of which are based on actual, some of which are derived from actual and more fictional. We're starting to look at IP in the form of fiction book authors that want to produce an entertainment product for podcasts or for television series. So that I'm leaning into that a bit side of the spectrum. And then on the audiobook side, we do about 30% of our books are fiction titles. And in which cases we have a casting director named Amy Faith, and Amy finds the perfect voice if it's not the author themselves. So,
Right. Awesome.
yeah.
What's the biggest challenge? So there might be people that are listening to this now saying, I've got a business, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, but I'm not sure where I go, how to do it. I've got no technical experiences. What for you, the sort of when you're talking to people, like the alarm goes off in your head and you're like, this could be really helpful for both of us. So what are the biggest challenges that people face from a sort of business podcast arena?
I think that the business podcaster recognizes the explosion in the medium. And as you have suggested, they're not sure where to start. And I like to dial them back in the initial conversation and our sales team too, and make sure they're really clear about why they want a podcast. What's the reason they want to do this? Do they want to show up as a personality in the space they're in, the vertical they're in, or the series of verticals in their business space? Do they want to use it as a prospecting tool to invite people on the show they like to engage with and deepen the relationship and ultimately create possibly a transaction? Do they want to tell stories and help impart knowledge in order to further their authority online?
Yeah.
A variety of ways and reasons someone wants to podcast. But I think having some clarity about it is essential. And some of our podcasters come in and they'll just do interviews. They're not really sure. And that can work. We know that it can work. There's this spectrum of over planning and thinking why you're going to do it, or leaving some of it to the theory of chaos. And I can't sit and tell you that one is better than the other, but to help the podcast client or potential client get a little bit clearer about how they want to approach this, at least at the beginning, leaving some room for evolution is those are the first things. And so that's a challenge in a way that they may not have known they had. The other challenge is that many of them come to us with a lack of clarity about how this serves them in their business. So immediately, many will jump to, how do I monetize my podcast? How do I monetize? And they're thinking advertisers. And the truth about advertisers for podcasts or even programmatic ads, which they fly in automatically from a network, it takes a huge audience to move the needle on that in any meaningful economic way. So the first thing is the audience of one. Invite people you want to do business on your show and leverage those into meaningful new connections for you on LinkedIn, wherever, and grow your network that way. The second level would be grow your audience through inviting people that have influence in their own audiences on your show. They'll share their relationships, share their episodes rather, and your audience will organically grow from that exposure from your guests. And then after you've reached 10 or 15 or 20,000 streams or listeners per episode, can you begin to contemplate any kind of meaningful revenue from an advertising income stream? So that's what I like to say. Yeah.
So the goal of the podcast, I talk to people and like, be clear on whether it's prospects, whether is it interest that maybe you're curious, or is there actually a business strategy? Because a lot of people just go, podcasts are doing well, why don't I start a podcast, without necessarily thinking it through. So I think that is absolutely crucial to have an idea of what the starting point, and as you say, things can evolve and things can change. The monetization is one of the biggest frustrations I get with anyone who's thinking about podcasting, because it's the first question. Like the first question I get when I speak to just generally people about podcasting, when can I monetize? And my point to them is, do 50 to 100 episodes and then think about how you monetize with commercials, with advertising, host read or programmatic. But you need to do 50 to 100 episodes. And the data that we're getting, and you probably got the similar sort of data, that most shows never reach 50. Most shows never reach episode 50.
The technical expression is pod fade. If this is an investment, it's to some level, it's an investment in. If you're having people hiring a company like ours to produce your show, or even if you're doing it on your own, it takes an investment. You've got to be consistent. You've got to show up. You have to have a format that's attractive. It has to be engaging, and you have to promote it. It's much like being an author. You have to promote the book. Writing the book is the easy part relative to go to market. So you have to have a go to market. You have to have resources in your fuel tank in order to make that happen. It's interesting that you say 50 episodes. The good news about that is it'll show that podcaster, here's what it takes to do this every week,
for a year. Basically, the reason, the mentality that I say is you're doing it for a year if you release once a week.
Precisely. But also the audience metrics are what advertisers buy. They don't buy a number of episodes. So I would add to your point that the audience development is critical. Within that year, you've got to develop a meaningful audience. And if you're not, it may just be that the product of your show didn't land. Now, if you're getting new business in the door, if you're a consultant or you sell retail products or whatever it is that you're doing, and you decided early on that the podcast is to help me grow this business back here, and it's a marketing investment, and that changes the framings mindset a bit. Are you getting new business would be the measure there. Not am I getting new advertising.
An interesting question, like, why do you appear as a podcast guest? What do you get out of
That's a
it?
great question. Yeah, so me personally,
Yeah.
so I think one of the things that's happening, some of this coming with age, is that I'm enjoying, I enjoy talking about myself. No, I enjoy to the extent that I can help make an impact with some of my stories about how I evolved as a human on the planet and in business with some amount of success and certainly an equal number of failures. I enjoy making that to pay it back contribution, pay it forward contribution. So there's that. I launched Media Minds recently. You asked me about being a guest, so I won't talk about host yet. I'm asked and I'm flattered and I'm honored that people want to talk to me. There's an ego thing here too, where I'm just like, wow, yeah, they want to hear what I have to say. Boy, I hope it's good. But I just show up and I try to be as real as possible, share
Yeah.
the stories, and hopefully it lands and makes an impact on somebody or not. And then the third, or maybe I don't know if this is the exact order of preference, but I am continuing to build a company. And so I hope that some level they'll relate to my stories and like the way I think about things, want to meet my team and do a show with us and or
Yeah.
do their book with us. And so there's a business build agenda for me as well.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the lead story as much as it was maybe in the beginning.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah.
What do you think about the rise of AI generated content? And do you see that being the future of audio slash podcasting?
Wow. Wow. So I'm sure you've talked to a few guests about AI.
Oh
We're
yes,
doing this now.
it's the buzzword.
It's out there. Yeah. So I believe we're in the next serious, deeply serious mind shift, humanity shift, industrial revolution, if you want to call it that. We're in the next Gilded Age, and there are a lot of cycles going on here. I follow Ray Dalio, whose work I love,
Yeah.
and I'm learning from him constantly. And if you look at cycles in humanity and cycles in countries and technology, um, I don't think that any of us can exactly know with any level of specificity how AI is going to impact our lives in the next few years. Certainly, you listen to Ray Kurzweil or Peter Dominicus. Wait, I'm not sure I said his name right. Dominitis, something like that. Anyway, these guys they're they're talking about AI in very extreme terms. And there's a part of me that really believes that's true. And because of that, when a question is asked or framed about is this the future of podcasting and audiobooks? I have to stand back and say, I think it's probably changing the future of everything.
Yes.
And then the subset of which is my business. Is this going to seriously change how we do what we do, short term, midterm, and long term? Yeah. I've told my team, I think we'll still be doing podcasts and audiobooks and we'll be helping people get their content out.
Yeah.
But I think the way we do this, if we survive this industrial revolution,
Yeah.
tech industrial revolution, will be possibly unrecognizable. And we'll be finding that we're adding a human element. So here's the thing, it really points to my company's the way we show up in our positioning is we're not like a platform business where you buy gold, silver, or bronze, and then it
Yeah.
just happens. We're very high touch. So as long as humans are needed to help people do this stuff,
Yeah.
we'll have a business that I think is viable. Have I thought about could I make the leap to being a SaaS business and
Mm.
just playing the technology side? It's not in our DNA to do that.
Right.
So I think as long as humans are needed, we'll have a business.
So
That's not exactly the question you asked,
no,
but
but
I'm sort
my
of putting it in
my
the framework of how am I thinking entrepreneurially.
so my view is
Yeah,
there is going to be more and more AI content being pumped out. So you might find that AI generated images that are going to do Instagram ads and TikTok ads and things like that's always going to happen. I still have
right.
faith that there is still going to be a desire and a want for humans involved in content. So you might end up, which I sometimes do, get AI creating a bio, get AI creating a LinkedIn post, but you still need a human to review it and make it authentic to how you communicate.
Exactly.
So I still think there
So
will need a human involved at the moment. And I still think podcasts will still be great because people will be thirsting and desiring to have a human talking to a human rather than an AI talking to an AI.
yes, exactly. And you and I both know that you can do talking we've done it. We've done tests and we've generated content, excuse me, with an AI interviewer and a
Yes.
clone of our guest talking about his book. The content of the interview was probably superior than in terms of its density and
Mm.
coverage was probably more spectacular than it would have been if it was the two humans talking to each other
Yeah.
because of the way the memory works in
Yeah.
humans. We can't recall everything. We can't that guest couldn't go out to the internet and remember everything about him and the
Yeah.
work he does and talk about it vis-a-vis the book he wrote. This did an unbelievable job, but the fact that it wasn't a human talking to a human is somewhat, I don't know if troubling is quite the word, but all right, so there's that.
It's a challenge.
Now
It's a challenge, I think. Yeah.
for audiobooks, it was a mind blower, by the way, that test. For audiobooks, this has been a challenge because most of our work is nonfiction. And we have found that cloning an author's voice, if they're going to use their voice,
Mm.
and then having us produce it with AI generated voice, that's a viable
Yeah.
model because it sounds pretty darn good.
Yeah.
It isn't quite them, but and for the author, it optimizes their budget, and it means they don't have to sit through a series of 90-minute recording sessions with our producer,
Yeah.
which is the way it's typically done, to get it done. So it's more efficient, it costs them less, and they get the content out.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty viable solution in today's production environment.
Yeah.
Fiction, forget about it right now, because if you've got any kind of dialogue or emotional spectrum that needs to be covered by characters, pronunciations,
Yeah.
oh man, it's a nightmare. To your point, you end up having to go back and listen to it and proof it so much and change so much anyway
Yeah.
that you might as well just do the casting and get a real talent in the studio to do it. So there's different strokes around this. On the podcast side, we have a product where we'll do that interview with an author. You don't have time to sit and be in an interview. We'll clone your voice and we'll just design the interview
Yeah.
around questions and answers, and you'll get your content out there.
Yeah.
It won't be you, but it'll still get out there. So it's a value decision. Is it more important that it's real, or is it more important that this is a really concise
Yeah.
and full spectrum content interview with the AI version of me?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the audiobook's a non-fiction audiobook. I can see the rationale because it is pretty intense to read your whole 300, 400, 500 page book over a number of sessions. Some people are good at it. Some people aren't very good at it. I can see that. I still think so. There's a podcast at the moment that's been released. There was an interviewer in the UK called Michael Parkinson, and he was very famous in the UK. He used to interview all the stars on a sort of 7 o'clock Friday evening, like in the 80s and 90s, where we all sat around the television and watched the same thing.
Right.
And they've been able to generate, and it's AI Michael Parkinson interviewing current people. And I think that's quite an interesting sort of dynamic. But what I like about it is it's not hiding that it's AI. And I think that's a choice that we need to give the audience, that it has to be clear that it's AI generated rather than trying to mask it, that it is actually, obviously he's been dead for 20 years, but like we need to give people choices. If they're happy and comfortable that AI is generating the questions, then that's fine. But I think we need to give them the choice.
That's a really brilliant framework. If they're happy and satisfied with it, and I think maybe over time there will be human adaptation. I see it already happening. It happened with MP3 is a heavily condensed audio, and for audio files that are used to the depth of the bit depth, high fidelity audio, full spectrum recordings, and then having it reduced to this flatter audio, there's a lot of sensitivity. So it depends on the human's ability to adapt to it, both in terms of the sound and the cadence. And but I have a question, Mark. In that case, he's been dead for 20 years, so he's interviewing. Who's the guest? Is the guest an AI version of
No,
the
guests
person?
are human, current famous people. And that's why it's an interesting experiment, because it's using his pronunciations, his diction, his way of asking types of questions that were interesting to him and his audience. But they're actually, he's been dead for 20 years and they've created this AI. And it's to the point, which this completely blows my mind, is that it's not like when AI ChatGPT first came out, they just put in a whole bunch of information and it was then being able to spit out answers. But actually, it created it in a way that it's almost its own entity in the way that it asks the questions. But no, they're interviewing current famous people, and that's why I
That's
find it an interesting
interesting.
experiment.
That's fascinating. Somewhat related, on our sales side of our business, I'm conducting a test now. This is not for Audiovita. This is for one of our subsidiaries called the Financial Media Network. And what we're doing there, this is a podcast platform and PR platform for companies that want to either they're raising capital or they're just looking to get news out to the markets.
Mm.
So it's a little bit more capital markets and businesses talking to them. We're testing a outbound AI voiced agentic AI sales process where there's a list of phone numbers. Mark gets a call. Hello, Mark. And to your point, we immediately disclose that this is David. I'm an AI agent for the Financial Media Network, and I want to tell you about something we're doing that might be of interest. And then it goes on and explains a little, and then it asks a question. You can respond to the question, and there's a little bit of latency. It's a little
Yeah.
weird. You can feel it. We tell them and we disclose that it's an AI. And we thought that the reason I wanted to test this is that while it's counterintuitive that you could connect with someone on a sales endeavor, um, companies that are particularly in tech, they may be really intrigued by it.
Yeah.
And so we'll see how it goes. We're going to do a few hundred calls within a week or two, and
Yeah,
I'll
someone
report back. But
so someone I got connected with was exactly creating that. So answering phone, making sales calls with AI, and it was at such a level like natural language in that it was
yes,
producing responses as a human would rather than just having 10 questions it needed to ask. So it is fascinating. It is a
right,
fascinating
right.
space.
It's a slight tangent for us, but again, an application of AI, which I'm fascinated with.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible tool, and but I think it should be deemed as a tool. Like, I think it's like the print press, it's like television. It's going to be a
Oh
tool
yeah.
for what we use it for as humans. Anyway, let's move on from AI because there's lots of other things I want to talk to you about.
Okay, cool.
What's
The
been
one I was going to add one little
oh,
thing
go for it. Sorry,
just
go for it.
to add to what you just said, real quick. So, Mark, it's been suggested that AI, the AI of everything, if you like,
Yeah.
will eventually become like electricity, where it's invisible, just a utility that we all know and use all the time. It's not really the it. Okay.
Yeah,
I
no,
just
absolutely. And this
you
is
hinted at that, and I wanted to. Yeah.
yeah, it is a fascinating area, and it's interesting because it's interesting what you're trying and experimenting with is ways that companies need to be embracing AI, or the people will lose jobs and they'll have a salesperson and they won't need
Yes.
salespeople or legal researcher. They're going to be gone. Like all research,
Oh yeah, the coders.
the
There's all this
coders
talk
as
about.
well.
This is
Exactly.
what I mean by it's another industrial revolution
It
where
is.
the craftsmen that made non-matching firearms
Yeah.
in England
Yeah.
way back
Yeah.
were replaced by the American mechanized manufacturing system where they could do the work that 20 people used to have to do, filing the parts for those guns,
Yeah.
and now it's just done by manufacturing. It's exactly analogous to that in my
It
mind.
is.
It's just a different set of technology.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I understand that you've worked with really big companies like Disney and the Discovery Channel. How were you able to establish those sorts of partnerships and work with them?
Very good question. It may surprise you or not, but we had a studio in Santa Fe, New Mexico during a certain period of time early in the 90s. We had established ourselves in Dallas and we had a satellite. And we actually moved to Santa Fe for a while and lived there and co located with the studio. And this was a question of we were just in the right place at the right time. Fe, it turns out there was a lot of films being shot there. There were a lot of celebrities that lived there. And so we were the only studio in Santa Fe, New Mexico that could do certain things like lock to picture.
Mm.
And we became known as a place where famous people like Clancy Brown
Mm.
or rest in peace Gene Hackman,
Mm.
who we got to know pretty well, came over and they would
Wow.
record lines for films doing ADR and looping and all these things
Yeah.
because we were the only ones there. It wasn't a case where we were shopping to do this, because if we were in LA, we'd be like another post-production studio. But because we were this island in a place where there were none others like us, we became known to do that work. So we did some stuff for animation. We did some stuff for Amblin They were shooting various television series. And because some of the famous people, or they were shooting in Santa Fe, just because of the nature of the exteriors in Santa Fe are pretty phenomenal than anywhere else on the planet. So if they had a location shoot, rather than having them fly everybody back to LA to loop the lines for the last
Yeah.
episode of the series, they would come into our studio and we'd do the looping.
That's
But it was
amazing.
very opportunistic. There was nothing intentional about that. But to your point, it's nice to have the name on my resume.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me about Media Capital Ventures. I know it's something that you're paying more, not more attention to, but you're paying attention to it as a venture. Why don't you tell me about what the strategy behind it is and what you're trying to develop there?
Thank you for asking. Yes, you do know that about a year and a half ago, I created an entity called Media Capital Ventures, and we now call it MCVI, with the idea that we would grow a platform or a consortium of businesses tangential to production, podcasting, audiobooks, and maybe beyond in media. This is my true, as Michael Gerber would say, my entrepreneurial seizure. I want to grow something bigger than Audiovita can be.
Mm,
Audiovita is a boutique production house with a DNA and a culture that it would be counterintuitive to try to grow it beyond the limits, much beyond the limits of where it is now, simply because of the nature of the people, the team, the way they function. I don't want to disturb that entrepreneurial spirit, but I am interested in growing. So rather than trying to force more sales into Audavita, I said, wait, let's find other like companies that are our size, maybe smaller, that are looking to grow and be a part of something larger with the idea that we would grow a larger enterprise that we can exit more substantially in 5, 7 years or so. So instead of a $2 million business, we now have a 10 or $15 million business that where there's an exit is more viable. So that was the initial strategy. Now, I engaged with a company out of New Jersey to try to raise capital with this model in mind, and it didn't land well with investors. All the capital seems to me is growing into either biotech or AI or
yeah.
things that are just more promising in terms of delivering a 10, 20, 30x return
Yeah.
for investors. So for that reason, and also because I think what I was envisioning looked a little bit too much like a fund, almost a private equity fund. It's almost a proxy for private equity. Investors were like, no, I don't want to do that. What do I need you for? I can just go start my own fund. Whatever those reasons were, we didn't raise any money. So I'm still trooping on today as we're speaking because I believe there's something to this. I've talked to what I now call my short list of business owners that are in production or tangentials, agencies that are related to media. And there is an appetite to forge forces with a company that where shared resources can be a benefit. Anything from HR to accounting to sales to accounts receivable to all of those things are shared across the platform for a lot of small businesses, that's attractive. So they can be freed up from the drudgery of running their business. And now they can just do what they love to do,
Yeah.
produce the podcast, do the business development, engage with their clients in all the other ways without having to deal with the maintenance of the business. And concurrent to that, we're just about to issue 1 million shares. It sounds like a big number, but it's 1 million shares of MCVI, Media Capital Ventures, so that we can use that as a currency to begin to forge relationships with these companies that may want to come in. It may be walk before you run, but
Mm,
start as strategic partnerships.
mm.
And then maybe if we like working together, we find a path to a more deeper relationship economically, then we'll move into that level of engagement. I'm moving on, but it's a bit of a story. It's a bit of a work in progress
Right.
as I talk to these smaller companies, find out what their pain points are. Because if I'm not solving something for them
Yeah.
and we're not adding value for them, then there's no point to do it. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
So
But it shows ambition. It shows that you're looking to expand your network and who you're doing with. I think it's
yeah,
and it's what is interesting from a business point of view is you're trying to find a better exit strategy at some point.
yeah. For me, the fork in the road is look. I'm 65 years old. I could run. I could let this company run itself. I'm not really operationally involved in a high degree, and I don't. I won't say I would retire per se. Word. I have a problem with
Yeah.
that word, but I could not do this thing.
Mm,
But there's something about I don't want to look back at 85 years old and say I really had this ambition. I wanted to try to build a larger enterprise
Mm.
because I'm interested in corporate finance. I'm interested in all those things. And now, as I've evolved as a business person, I want to exercise those chops, learn as much as I can in the process, and it may or may not fail. So I'm still investing in building a larger sales platform,
Yeah.
international sales platform to service Audiovita and then the other companies that come in.
Yeah.
And that's the vision now. Yeah, I think you hit it right on. But the other path would be I could just run it like it is. And I may decide in a year or two if I'm not successful in attracting other businesses that like the idea, they like the team, they like what I'm doing. I've got a tremendous advisory team around me to do this. Then I may just say, you know what, I'm going to just let's just let Audiovita continue to grow organically, and I'll do real estate or something else rather
Yeah.
than media. I'll do something in AI. No, God forbid. It's so competitive. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. For anyone trying to be in that game, it's been said, and this is related. I'm sorry, I'm going on a
No,
bit
go for it.
longer. The AI thing, I thought it'd be interesting to find a startup AI company and bring that into MCVI because now we own the technology.
Mm.
But there's tremendous risk that goes with that. As soon as you're strapped to one solution, one Descript, one Riverside, and our one way of doing AI and applying it, voice tech. I've seen 3 voice tech companies that we were working with go out of business since in a year and a half.
Yeah. It is
So there's
competitive.
tremendous risk in this startup thing, and then they blow up.
Yeah.
And now what? And there's one winner that emerges. And in today's market, it's 11 labs in terms of voice tech.
Yeah. It's an
So
interesting.
I think there's a lot of risk that goes with being in AI as an investor, as a partner in that space. So I've really started with the idea that I'd rather have businesses that are just generating durable businesses that have a long range view
Yeah.
that generate a nice return on capital and equity. And that would be good enough. But
Yeah.
investors want more. And
Yeah.
it's hard. They want so much more. I can't promise 20x return in 5 years.
Yeah.
Really? That's a bit of a conundrum from very transparent
Yeah.
here.
No, thank you for your
But
honesty. How do you think
yeah.
you've
All right.
evolved as a leader?
Oh, I love the way you host this, by the way, Mark.
Thank you.
Bravo. Because you're just getting right to the point of it. The thing that I didn't know about, I thought I was just growing a production company, but what I didn't really understand was that the value of the impact I'm having on my employees' lives, on our freelance participants, and on the clients we serve. It sounds a little hokey, but the impact has been profoundly satisfying. So, taking that energy of the impact and translating that to some, I don't know if it's a formula about leadership, but it's the way I lead. It fuels the satisfaction about the leadership, which ultimately continues to serve the impact. So it's almost like a flywheel that keeps generating more energy, regenerating more
Yeah.
energy. Because the more I get delight out of the impact, the easier it is to just naturally lead. I don't even have to try.
Mm.
When I was doing music, though, I'll talk about, you asked about the evolution of me as a leader. When I was a 26-year-old music producer, this is interesting. I would go into the recording sessions with a sense of much more control. I would write every note out for the players. I would really want this to sound like what I had in my head. There's the client there. I have to please them too, but I really want to control this, whatever comes out of the studio in that session.
Mm.
And as I grew and became more comfortable and confident that whatever I would write would satisfy my client, I began to loosen up a lot and I began to allow more space for the singers, the musicians to add to the creative process.
Yeah.
And in the music context, the metaphor is beautiful because now I'm really hanging back. I'll ask good questions and I'll nudge my CEO. I'm learning how to help her be a better CEO.
Yeah.
That's tremendously satisfying. And I picked the right person. She's
Good.
just embraced it beautifully. And now she's taken a VA that she hired and is becoming our fractional COO.
Right.
So it's almost like it's being passed
Mm.
on the leadership chain, if you
Yeah.
like. And I'm not you can probably tell from my personality, I'm not a dictatorial, is that the word? Not dictatorial in my approach to leadership. I get the right people there and I let them breathe and do their,
Yeah.
and that so far has proved well. So back to the music thing, the less I tried to control things,
Yeah.
the better it got. But I don't think you can do that when you're 25 or 26 and you're
Yeah.
just starting. It's very hard to do it at that age. It took the time to let that unfold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
it's a great metaphor because you then have, as a musician, you then have other people's impact and other people's views, and they can create something even better. And in business, it's the same way. Like you need to get out of
Totally
your
true.
own way to be able to grow a business. That's what I've heard so many times on this show. Drop your
It's
ego, get out the
so
way,
true.
and you'll grow faster.
It's so true. In fact, even on a tactical level, sometimes I have impulses. My impulses, I'll see a text go by, or I'll see emails flying by, or on Slack, and I'll feel this impulse to get in there and say something, or I think I'm adding, I think I'm
Yeah.
helping. And my COO will wink to me and say, we got this.
Yeah.
Or I end up just making it more complicated than it would have been if I just stayed out of the way. So I'm learning. It took me a little while. I'm still learning how to let go. As much as I'm basking in my evolution of now being a hands-off leader, I'll have those impulses. And so what I'm training my brain now to rewire is just slow down. It's not an emergency. It's going to be okay. And I think for a lot of the entrepreneurs you've talked to about this,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
similar. It's like a reflex.
there's a great thing that Jeff Bezos says about growing a business. When he was growing Amazon as a bookstore online, he was involved in absolutely every decision that he made. Now, we're talking different scale here, but as Amazon impacts now, he says I have to make 3 good decisions a week.
Yes, higher impact, fewer of them.
Yes. When
I
you're
think
the
I read
CEO,
that.
when you're driving everything, you're still getting involved in lots of different avenues because you need to be impacting them. But the larger it gets, it sounds like you're moving into that phase of your life where you just have to make shorter, sharper, but more deeply impacting questions and decisions.
That's very true, Mark. Thank you for reflecting that back. It's true, and it's more strategic,
Yeah.
very hyper strategic.
Thank you, David. Coming to the end of the interview, I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the
Okay.
best decision that you've made?
I didn't think you'd trick me with that one. You're not tricking me, but this is me. It's my mind is racing with possibilities. The best decision that I've made in my life was to transition from being just a drummer to learning how to write and produce music.
Wonderful. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
To lean into my natural ability to bring calm to situations.
And is that part of your meditation, your transcendental meditation? Has that helped?
Yes, yes, we'll do that on our next
Yeah, we'll do that in
edition of your
another one.
pod if it should happen. Yes, the meditation has been truly valuable. Also, a coach that I'm working with who helped me understand that's going on and to own it. So,
Next question. Who's
yeah.
helped you most in your career?
Oh, man, again, back to my transition into commercial music, a guy named Dick Marks. You may know the pop star Richard Marks.
Yeah,
His father is the guy that I mentored with back when I was telling my story in Chicago. So he taught me the business. He took me under his wing and allowed me and gave me the context to be able to lean into my talent and develop it further so that I could um, begin the journey.
amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
I think a regret I have, I talked about the bagel business period where I closed down my music company and moved into this turnaround. I think that I underestimated the risk of that endeavor, and that had some consequences. So I failed to recognize potential risk in an entrepreneurial context. That is.
Amazing. What are you most proud of?
Today, let's see, 2 things. One is I'm proud of the impact I made with my music. I did a lot of stuff for children, and there's a lot of music out there flying that's still out there playing internationally that I wrote. So I'm proud of that, and I'm also proud of the team I've got now and the work they're doing, and whatever part I played in putting that team together.
Amazing. Tell me something that most people don't know about you.
I'm an introvert.
Really? Is that how
This
you
reminds me
is
of
that how you see
this.
yourself?
Yes, I think I'm probably a hybridvert, or whatever they call those. a blendivert. I can turn it on, but I like to be alone, and I spend a lot of time alone, and I'm very comfortable in that world.
Yeah.
Writing music was a very alone endeavor, as you can imagine. But I'm at my core, I'm a private person. Yeah,
Mm. I'll tell you something just quickly. I tell my kids, so my kids are 9 and 11. I say to them
yeah,
about being comfortable in yourself on your own. You need to be able to do that. It's an important skill set. So that's something that
absolutely. Oh, the other thing I'm most proud of is that I've been married for 40 years and I have two sons that are 34 and 36, both on their own, doing great things and great relationships, great careers. So I
amazing.
probably should have led with that,
That's
the
right.
shouldas and wouldas.
What does legacy mean to you?
I'd like to grow a company and continue to have the impact on my employees, my stakeholders, and my life. Build a business that can last beyond me would be an interesting. I've contemplated this a lot. I don't know how important that is to anybody else, but that feels like a worthy cause.
Yeah, amazing. And lastly,
You
where
know,
can
we're
people
here and
find
then we're not here. Go ahead. Go
that's
ahead.
right. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you and your business?
The best way is www.audivita.com, Audivita, like the car Audi, and Vita, like in life. The sound of life, it's from the Latin. And that's our website. That's the best way to find me. You can also email me at dwolf, DWOLF, at audivita.com.
That's wonderful.
Or on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me there.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Thank you so much for being on my show. It's been an absolute pleasure. You are an absolute star. So thank you for taking the time
This
out and being on
was
my show.
this rocked. You are a great interviewer. I love your style. You're like the James Lipton of business. It's
Oh,
wonderful. I don't know
thank
if you
you.
know who that is, but he was from the Actors Studio. Yeah. All right. Anyway, be
Thank you.
well.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much
and
for your
we'll
time.
talk soon.
Cheers.
All right. Be well.
I really hope you've enjoyed that content. It's a really fascinating interview that I've done there. So please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a like. Please do give a subscribe. It'd be really good to boost the subscriptions. It really makes a difference to the algorithm in YouTube. So thank you for that. If you do hit subscribe, hit the bell icon and you'll get all of the content. You'll get notified when all the content is available. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks a lot.